I'm currently getting ready for the Aquashella Aquarium Festival, and I'm also going to show you how I painted this acrylic painting using their logo for the festival. I've been working on getting ready for this show for, it seems like the last year, but it's only been several weeks. My apartment is an absolute mess, and you look around and go, oh, it's not so bad, Lisa. You're over-exaggerating. No, look at this. What in the world? My whole hallway is nothing but boxes for this event. This isn't even everything. There's more in the car. This is just ridiculous. I'm going to tell you more about what's in those boxes at the end of the video. If you are supporters over on Patreon, make sure to head over where I've got the over 2-hour-long version of this tutorial available for you now, along with over 150 of my past longer tutorials. If you are unfamiliar with Patreon, for as little as $4 a month, you get access to each of my new 1 to 2 hour long videos, and all of those past 1 to 2 hour, my brain stopped. It just stopped right there. But you get access to over 150 videos that are already uploaded instantly. If you want to head over to my website, I will have a link in the video description. It'll show you a video library just so you can get an idea of what I have there. I also have a free 2-hour-long colored pencil tutorial that you can watch now just for heading over to look. For this painting, I am working on a 24-inch Frederick's Convexo canvas. This one has those beveled edges. And this video is sponsored by Frederick's, just for transparency there. But with this painting, I did add 1 or 2 coats of gesso, let it dry, sanded it down with 400 grit sandpaper so that I had a smoother surface. And I don't have to do that on all of the canvases. This one, this type of canvas, it just has a heavier tooth, and I like the shape of the canvas, so it's worth it for me to go ahead and make that a little bit more smooth. Normally, I go with the Blue Label or their Belgian linen canvas if I want something that comes really, really smooth to start with. I painted a base layer of blue on the entire canvas. It didn't even matter what color. I just didn't want to fight the white of the canvas. Let it dry completely, and now I'm going to go over it. I need to create this fade from light blue down all the way to black at the bottom of the canvas. And what you're seeing me do there is take my airbrush and mist water. I'm just spraying water on it, and this will allow me to keep that paint wet for as long as I need. It makes it very, very easy to get smooth blending. Acrylic paint dries very, very fast. So by keeping it wet in that way, I can take all the time in the world I want. If I want to take 2 hours to blend a background, I can keep that wet with the airbrush the whole time if I want to. Now, I don't typically use a spray bottle or anything like that because that's going to give you heavier water droplets that can, when you go over with the mop brushes you're seeing me use here, that can pull those bits of paint off the canvas, and you end up with these little dots or little holes where those bigger water droplets hit. So that's why I like the airbrush better than using a spray bottle. Now I'm taking my black paint. I had to rinse my brush out completely. So big tip, if you've been using paint like I was on the top where I mixed white in with my blue and you want to fade it down into black, before you hit the black, switch or rinse the brush out really well so you don't have any white left in it. There was, even though it looked like it was blue, the fact that I had white mixed in with it, it would have created this gray look instead of shifting down to black as I wanted here. It would have had a very, almost a foggy black, is that even a term? But this foggy black look instead of that true deep dark black that I wanted. So I let that dry completely, and now I'm taking some airbrush paint and I'm airbrushing a bit of a violet color over the black. And the reason that I'm doing this, actually doing that over some of the blue too, but the reason that I'm doing this, and you can't really tell on the video, but it keeps my black from looking like flat black. I'm tinting the color so that it ends up looking even darker than it would if it were black all by itself. It really doesn't show on that video, so I apologize for that, but that's what I was doing there. I can use black, I can use violet, I can use blue, anything I want there. Now I decided that I didn't feel that my transition between the light blue down into the black was as smooth as I wanted it to be. So I added some white airbrush paint, and that one is by Goldens, and I'm just going to lightly go over this, and then I'm going to go back over that again with the blue paint. And in this case, I'm going to do this with the airbrush. Again, going back over that with white. And so all that work I did to make sure that I did not have foggy black, I put white over it anyway and it didn't matter. But now I can go over it with the blue of the airbrush. And if you don't have an airbrush, just glaze the paint. Thin it a bit with water or with your glazing medium, whichever you prefer. And you can tint the color that way as you need it. The airbrush just makes it really, really easy for me to get very smooth blending on that background. And yes, it can be done without. It just is a lot easier. And I'm lightening up again. I'm going to make that a bit brighter up at the top. Unfortunately, my lights overexpose really badly where I've got the highlights, so it looks brighter than what it really is. I'm taking some blue. We're going to darken those edges up a bit more. Now notice how I'm keeping this curve. It's a slight U shape. This is going to help me to create depth in the water versus just making a flat line from the light to the dark. So now I've got my base colors there. I let that dry completely, and I drew out the Aquashella logo, just so I had an idea of what to paint around it. Now, I could have waited to draw that in until later, but in this case, this let me know where to paint my stars and everything in. I used my airbrush, and you've seen me do this a lot before with a stencil, and apparently I didn't catch that on video, so I apologize for that. But I used a stencil, and I'll put a link to that in the video description, and it is great for getting this galaxy look. I airbrushed that pattern with white with the stencil, let it dry, and then I go over it with yellow and magenta to tint the color. I can't just go straight yellow or magenta with the stencil over the black background because it won't show up. Those colors are too transparent. So by airbrushing the white pattern first and then glazing or airbrushing the color on top of it, that gives me this really easy, very fast looking space scene. It really takes maybe, I wouldn't even say that takes like 5 minutes, and it's one of the best looking parts, I think. Now I'm adding some ripples in the water, just a few, and I'm using white for that. Dried that, and now I'm going to airbrush blue back over those white ripples, which you can't really see. I'm working off camera, which is one of my things I'm best at doing. So I apologize for that, but I'm just creating some of those ripples. I've got some rays of light now I'm airbrushing down, and this was with my white airbrush paint again. That is the Golden's white. And I do have videos where I show you how I painted this galaxy. I'll put a link to some of those in the video description if you want to see that done. Now I'm going to paint the inside of my logo. Now with this one, half the logo, the side on the right is going to be saltwater. The side on the left is going to be my freshwater. So the freshwater is going to have a bit more of a green tint, but for now I'm just going to keep it easy and do everything with the color that the saltwater will be, and then I can just glaze green over the freshwater half later on. But this way I've got that nice fade from light to dark. I'm using some raw sienna there for my edge of the logo. Now, the challenge that I had here is I needed to make sure that the logo stood out, even though I'm going to have so much busyness with all of the fish. So I've added some unbleached titanium white and violet for my shadows and for the highlights. And this gives me that shiny gold look. And now we will paint the octopus. And I actually went back and forth on him. I kept changing the colors as I went, kept changing my mind on what I wanted him to look like. Now, if you are unfamiliar with Aquashella, it is an aquarium festival. I've been talking about it a lot in my recent videos. Lots of fish paintings I've done for this lately. A lot of live streams with pieces for that. And one of the people who is putting this on is a fellow YouTuber named George. His channel is Coralfish12G. Really funny videos. You should definitely check those out. But this specific painting is for him. I painted two for the show, this one and then a much larger, a 36 by 48 inch piece. But this one is going to George. And so for this one, I also wanted to include not just a mixture of fish, but his fish. He has two clownfish that are on his channel all the time, Scarlett Johansson and Shaun White. So they're going to be in this. And then the seahorses are also his. Now, I'll have a link to his channel in the description. You should check that out as well. I've also got a preview that he had done. Well, I guess I don't have it. He has a preview of the past Aquashella, which is really cool. If you're going to be in the Dallas area, March 30th and 31st of 2019, my gosh, I cannot talk tonight. But if you're going to be out here, this is going to be a really fun event to come to. Lot of things for both adults and kids, so it's going to be a great family event. I'm even going to have, Frederick sent me quite a few little fish-shaped canvases to hand out to kids that you can take home and paint. So I've got some giveaways if you do bring kids to the event. Those will be available for them at my booth. So now I'm coming through and adding some shading on the octopus. I used the liner brush to create a lot of texture in his skin. I ended up painting over all of it anyway. When you're working with acrylics, don't worry about messing something up. If you paint something and you're like, man, I really don't like this layer, it doesn't look good, don't worry about it. Paint over it. It is the one of the easiest mediums, I think, to fix mistakes or to change your mind and paint over something, change colors, change anything really. I can decide I didn't want an octopus and paint over that too. Very easy. So when you're working, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Make the mistakes. That's how you're going to learn what you like or don't like. But make all the mistakes you want and just paint over them if you don't like how they came out. You're more likely to come up with something really, really cool in doing that than you would being too afraid to try something because you're too afraid to make a mistake. Don't be afraid of the paint or the canvas or the brushes. Unless you drop the brushes on the floor and then step on them later. Sometimes that hurts. You can be a little afraid of that. So I'm adding some highlights here with the light blue going around the edges. And now these highlights that I'm adding, it's not correct as far as science, I guess. It doesn't, that's not where the light hits. I just think it looks nice. It makes the octopus stand out. Sometimes you get to decide to make changes on a painting based on you think it looks better, not based on this is correct to my reference photo. You're an artist in this case, not the photographer. So sometimes, like this case, totally okay to change things. Now, if you're doing a portrait, you don't get to change as much. Maybe with some of the lighting and such. I mean, you can add outlines like that as well, but you don't have as much artistic freedom if you're still trying to make something look fairly realistic. But with something like this, with fish, I change all kinds of things. I definitely go with a more stylized look when I paint marine life. So there is the inside of the logo there. I wanted it to look like a bubble or this kind of a clear crystal type or glass look. And then I've painted the coral on the inside of the saltwater and then just seagrass or plants. I don't know a lot about freshwater in all honesty, so that is what it's supposed to be on the freshwater side. Going through and shading my coral. Now, I quickly realized that when I had worked on this, I worked on it for so long, one of the first few nights, and I hit a point where I was just being lazy with the coral, didn't like how it looked at all, and here's an example. Didn't like it? Okay, paint over it. Don't leave it looking how you don't like, just paint over it. So I created that shadow area down there, then I took a white charcoal pencil and redrew different coral. They were coming out looking too flat. I just didn't like the shapes that I had or the colors that I had chosen, so I decided just to repaint that whole area. It was a quick fix, and I do that a lot if I've been painting too long in one painting session. Sometimes my eyes just get tired. I start getting lazy, just all around lazy, where I just want to get something done, but I'm not really making the best decisions. I'm making decisions based on, this is fast, let's do it that way. And I'll come back the next day and go, okay, yeah, now I need to slow down and redo all of this. But look, you can't even tell that I painted over it. It looks like it was supposed to be this way from the beginning. I want to get a few different types of corals in here and some bright colors so that you really see a difference between the freshwater and the marine side. The freshwater side, they won't typically, with the plants, they don't have the same type of vibrant colors. You're going to get a more earthy greens. You do have some reds and pinks. I mean, you can get some really interesting plants with freshwater too, but they tend to lean more towards very neutral colors compared to corals. Some more little guys in there. Now I am going to paint a few fish going in front of these. Not too many though. Messing with the octopus because, again, kept changing my mind. And it's funny because on him, I actually liked some of the earlier layers better than the later layers. So I had to repaint it so it looked more like it did in the beginning as I moved on. So with these seahorses, I drew them out on a piece of tracing paper. And that way I can do all of the erasing that I want without smudging my canvas. Then I used transfer paper. I used the white transfer paper from Low Cornell, and I'll have a link to in the description of all the supplies that I used. But I used transfer paper to transfer that onto my canvas. And the great thing with that is I was able to move that tracing paper around. I can see through it, so I can make sure I get those seahorses exactly where I want them. I want his tail, the one tail, hooked on the inside of the logo. And if I had drawn this on a clear or an opaque piece of paper, I couldn't see to adjust that where he needed to be exactly. So this is a huge reason I use tracing paper when I want to draw something off the canvas and then transfer it over. And I actually like cheap, kind of lower quality, I guess, generic transfer paper or tracing paper, that I get from Michael's or Hobby Lobby better than the more expensive name brand like Hansen. The Hansen one that I have, it's a little bit too thick and it's harder for me to see when I want to position something like on this canvas. So that is one art supply I definitely like to go a bit cheaper on. Starting to build up all of the little ridges in their bodies. And these are two of the seahorses that George, or Coralfish 12G here on YouTube, has. And you can see these on his channel. He shows them all the time. They're so cute. Using a lot of violet and purple for the shading. Being that I'm using so much yellow, or really it's more of a raw sienna, I don't want to jump to black for the shading. I will use a little bit of black for the darker areas, but if you jump to black, when it mixes in with the yellow, it comes out looking kind of muddy, kind of green. I definitely prefer shading with purples and violets whenever possible. And I'm using a synthetic hog-haired liner brush for a lot of the details here. I like the synthetic hog-haired liner brush better than the tack-on bristled liner brushes because it holds its shape better. It's easier to get fine details with that than it is with the tack-on bristled brush. And the one that I use, it's the generic one from Hobby Lobby. They're weirdly good for being generic. I really do like those brushes quite a bit. Got some highlights here. Now, I didn't use any titanium white as I was painting the base of the horses, the seahorses. That way, I was able to come back through and use my bright titanium white for my brightest highlights, and it really stands out. If I had used very much white as I was blending and as I was mixing colors, you really wouldn't see it. It wouldn't stand out enough. I'm using this orange, and the orange I use Liquitex Basics, not because they're cheap, just because I like how translucent they are. They work really, really well for the way that I glaze, the way that I paint. They're still light fast, they're still archival. They're just not as highly pigmented as, say, the Liquitex, or the soft body or the heavy body. These are the Liquitex Basics. But they are very translucent. So certain colors like the orange, I pretty much only use the orange that they make for when I'm glazing because it is so translucent. It doesn't have much pigment at all. If I want something to be really orange, I usually mix my own with my yellow and my red. But for glazing and tinting color, the orange out of the tube works really well. And I pretty much found that to be the case for all of the oranges in the Liquitex Basics. So now onto the clownfish. These guys, I believe, are called Miami Whites. I could have that wrong. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. This is Shaun White and Scarlett Johansson. Also, the fish belonging to Coralfish 12G, and you can see them on his channel as well. I'd say the fish were really funny, but it's just his comments he makes for the fish. They're fish. They're probably... I doubt they have that big of a sense of humor. I could be wrong. Now, I started by painting them violet. The majority of their bodies are white, but white is reflective. It's going to pick up colors around it, and I need a lot of shadows in here. So by starting with my darker violet color, I'm able to go back through with white just for my brightest highlights. Got some more blue for the shadows in there. And these guys don't have a whole lot of orange on them, but I want to paint the orange areas white first, let it dry, and then I can go over it with my orange. And that orange I mixed with my red and my yellow to have it come out really bright. It has more pigment than the orange out of the tube. Some even brighter whites now, just for the highlights. Now, I want to make sure that I have a lot of shadows in there. Otherwise, they just come out looking very, very flat. You've got to watch that when you paint white subjects. White is not going to be white. White is only really going to be used for your brightest highlights. Everything else is a reflection of what is around it. So it's going to be a lot darker than you think it is in most cases, whether that be roses that you're painting or any kind of white flower, a white vase, anything white, it's going to reflect what's around it. So don't just jump to, it's a white fish or a white flower, paint it white. That's going to come out looking very flat. So here are some coral banded, my brain shut off again. It has been happening a lot on this video. My coral beauties, there we go. Coral beauty angelfish. And you probably wouldn't see them typically schooling like I've got here, but I wanted this color. I just think they're so pretty, so I decided to put 3. If I don't comment, somebody's going to make sure I know. They don't swim in groups like that. Oh, unless they're babies. Sometimes. Or you put too many in a tank right before they kill each other. Okay, they're not that mean. So with these guys, I want this to fade from a bright orange on the inside of the body up to the purple on the outer edges. And so I go from yellow and then the orange, and then I start with my deep violet. I don't just jump straight to the darker purple. I'm going to layer that on top later on. They don't have to be perfectly blended. I'm going to put so many details over them that you won't even notice where I have brush strokes. It'll just add a little bit more detail. Now right now they still look really flat. I've got a lot of shading left to do on these guys. Some detail work on their fins there. Pulling more of the purple. Now that purple does have white mixed in with it. If I were to just use purple dioxazine there or a violet, it's not going to stand out. It's just going to make it look like a dark muddy color because you're going to see the yellow or the orange in underneath it. So by adding white to the purple first, I'll let that dry and then I can put a brighter purple on top of it after. And there's the purple dioxazine for the darkest portions of the fins. See how I just keep layering and layering and layering until I get it to look how I want. If you don't like how something looks, don't give up, don't get frustrated. It just means you're not finished yet. Keep layering until it looks how you wanted it to. So we've got some cardinal fish here. And these are another fish where their bodies are white, where I've got them painted purple. That's actually the white portion of the fish, or it's kind of a silvery white. It's reflective though, so it's going to pick up the blues from the surrounding. Now, I put a little bit of purple in with my blue just so that they would stand out from the blue of the background. My blue background is a very warm blue. I used a lot of phthalo blue, added a little bit of phthalo green to give me that slightly greenish tint. So with them, I added a bit of purple to the blue so that they would be a cooler blue versus the warmer blue of the background, and that will allow it to stand out a lot more. Now I can come through with titanium white and really pull out these highlights. Lots of dots on these guys. But if I had painted them white, I can't go brighter than that. So see how important it is to go fairly dark on the areas of, again, fish, flower, doesn't matter. You want to go a lot darker so that you can use your brightest white for your highlights. And I don't know what happened there. Some great editing on my part. Gonna add a little bit of purple on the underside of those fish, and then now onto these little firefish. These are one of my absolute favorite marine fish. These are purple firefish, actually. I think I like the red ones better. They're still really, really cute. See, anywhere where I wanted the orange to stand out, I had to paint it white first because the orange just would not show up against the blue of the background. Now again, there are different brands of paint. If you don't like to glaze like I do, there are other options. You can do the Liquitex soft body, you can do Golden's paint. They have a lot of other paints that are going to have more opaque oranges and reds. In my case, I just stick with these because I do so much glazing. It's easier for me just to keep using those, and I like the consistency of them. And I'll do the same thing on these goldfish. I'm going to want their bellies to be orange, so I paint them white first. And then I'm painting this kind of a grayish color. I mixed my phthalo blue, black, and white to get this bluish gray color for the black portions of the fish. And the reason that I'm not just jumping straight to, well, they're black fish, paint that part black. By painting this mid-range tone, I'm going to be able to come on top of that with black to create these deeper shadows. And I'm going to get a lot more depth in building it this way. There is some of the orange. That'll take a couple of layers to get it as bright as I want it to be. Now I'm painting purple over the dark portions of the fish. And they aren't actually purple. They're black fish. The purple is just reflecting. The black is very reflective, and so it's reflecting what's around them. Few highlights there, and I've added some black, and apparently not on video, but there are some black with the shadows now. You want to watch these lines when you're painting fish on the fins. Watch which direction those lines on the fins go, because that's what's going to give you the perspective so it looks like they're moving or flowing, depending on where you put that line. Don't put a bunch of straight lines everywhere. And every single line that I put is at least slightly curved. You're not going to see any straight lines. It'll make everything look very stiff. On to the next goldfish. Now this guy is orange and white, so I'm just going to paint everything white first. Then I'm going to let that dry, and I can go on top now with the orange. And it's very important that you let it dry, otherwise you're just going to make peach when you put the orange on top of the wet white paint. I've used a little bit of white mixed in with that. There's my peach, actually. A little bit of white mixed in with that, and I will glaze yellow on top of it. And I've got purple and magenta for my shadows. Again, you don't really want to use black for shading orange and yellow. It doesn't usually look good. There are exceptions, but more often than not, try the purple or a deep violet before you jump to shading with black when you're painting something that is orange or orange, red, and yellow. I'll generally try the purples and violets first. Now I can glaze color over the areas that were a bit too peach. Let that dry and we can move on to the betta. And I'm painting him white first. Just for the same reason, but the nice thing with this, look how I left the dark areas, the shadows in the fin. I let the background show through. I got to skip a step pretty much. I saved so much time by letting the dark background show through where the shadows needed to go. And then when I glaze the red over, the red can go over the black and the white, but the black areas will stay very dark because my reds are very translucent. That this, I'm pretty much using a Grizel method here where it's just the two-tone black and white and then glazing the color. Look how fast this was the easiest fish of all the fish I painted on here on this one. He was the fastest. That method worked so nice. And then just tinting with, or adding my shadows with the purples, some highlights with I've got yellow with a bit of red and some white for the highlights here. And then going around the edges with the blue. Now this blue, it's actually an aqua color mixed with blue and white that I'm using to line a lot of the fish. It separates them from the background, and I used it on this guy. You see it on some of the goldfish as well, but it gives me this nice look that separates those fish from the background. So again, not super realistic, but I like how it looks, and that's where you as an artist will come in and make that decision to make a change from whatever your reference photo is. If you are looking for a lot of reference photos for a fish to paint, I got a lot of these from Pixabay, so that's a really good place to look. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the disaster in my hallway and what is in some of these boxes. I'm really looking forward to Aquashella, and I'm really looking forward to it being over so I can get rid of all of the stuff in my hallway. So these are some of the fish-shaped canvases, little canvases that Frederick sent me that I can give to kids at the event. I'm super excited about those. They sent, I think, 200, so I should have plenty for all the kids. They also sent a whole bunch of these Wyland kits, if I can get one out. These are really neat. They're reef kits. They sent dolphins. I think I've got some sharks and some sea turtles as well. I don't have as many of those. So if you're coming, if you want those, come soon. And then this is my box from Vistaprint. I've got tons of postcards. Those ones I'll be selling. And then the business cards that you guys were there for the live stream, there's one of them. And where's the other one? The other one is the one with the lion. I like these. They have the really cool curved edges. Nope, don't need that. I really should just open that box and make my life easier. Here's the one with the lion. So there's technically the front. There's the back. The back is where I have all my info. But they printed so nicely. And that big roll you see in there is my banner, but you'll have to wait for part 2 of this video to see that once the booth is all together. And then this is more of the stuff that Frederick sent me. I've got some stickers, and they sent me this really neat sign that said sponsored by Frederick. It looks beautiful. So really cool stuff. And back here are my prints. I have some giclées that I had printed from Giclée Today. Oh my gosh, they came out beautifully. I'm so excited with how those prints looked. Those are the 12 by 18 inches. I also placed an order, and they're probably going to be here the day before the show, I hope. I ordered some 20 by 30 inch prints because they came out so nice. So I'll only have 15 of the large ones, and then I've got 50 of the smaller prints available. My studio is another disaster of my apartment right now, more so than usual. I've got a bit of an assembly line going where I'm varnishing paintings, because I usually don't varnish things until they sell in case I need to get another photo, because they don't photograph well once they've been varnished. But I need to get a bunch of those varnished, and then you've got to wait a few hours before you put the second coat. So I've got this assembly line going. And then this is the big 36 inch by 48 inch canvas. This one is on a Frederick's Blue Label canvas. They're ultra smooth. And I've got a mixture of, the lighting is terrible here, but I've got a mixture of fresh and saltwater on that one as well. You can see perspective-wise the difference in size between those two paintings. If you're going to be in the Dallas area on March 30th and 31st of 2019, make sure to come by. I've got some canvases to give away to the kids. I'll have prints available for sale and postcards and all kinds of fun stuff. More of my assembly line back here waiting to be varnished, or some have been varnished. Just so much to get done in the next couple of days. If you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my new painting videos every single week.